Hi there, it's Carol Doherty here for this week's Tuesday tip. I want to talk about understanding the perspective of others at work. It does really matter. So, I'm going to go back in my career and give you a story to show what I mean. I was working out of one of our suppliers' factories because they were late on parts. It was partially their fault, partially our increase in demand, steel shortages, all kinds of things became a perfect storm where they were holding us up on um, shipping our finished goods because we didn't have parts from them. So it was impacting all of our assembly lines. And so they shipped me down to work with them to try to figure it out. Well, every morning I had a call with each of the factories. So I had two calls first thing every morning, and I'm on the phone with the factories and I'm telling them, okay, here's what went out overnight. Here's what's on the next truck out. Here's what we have. Here's your part. Here's what's going on. And in every case, the factories felt like I was siding with the supplier. And often it was because I'm saying, okay, sorry, we're not going to have those parts. You're not going to get them. But we've been waiting for them for 2 weeks. I understand, but you're not going to get them. And so the factories were getting really frustrated with me. And in fact, one of the purchasing supervisors was yelling at me one day because he was so angry because he felt like I was siding with the vendor and that I wasn't making them do what they needed to do to get us the parts we needed. Well, what they weren't seeing was that I would spend my day often walking throughout this facility looking at our parts, what was there, and all too often, one of the parts that was chronically late, I would walk by and the one station didn't have the parts to make it. They were sheet metal parts, and he didn't have some of the pieces. So the welder can't weld our part if he doesn't have the pieces. And I would then backtrack from the welder's position back up to, through to the beginning of the process where the steel came in to see, okay, where was it? What was holding it up? And often it was because they didn't even have the steel. So I wasn't really siding with the vendor. I'm stating the reality of their operations. Here's what's in their factory. It wasn't me trying to protect them. I'm stating facts. Well, from the assembly line perspective, they're hearing Carol saying, well, yeah, you can't have those parts because, you just can't have them. Well, no, it was because they weren't there to have. I wasn't letting the supplier prioritize parts for other customers. We were their biggest customer, and believe me, we had priority, especially with me there every day. But there were times when there was nothing that could be done. The supervisor that was yelling at me one day, he was overseeing purchasing for 2 assembly lines, and they needed critical parts. The same part, but, same part on the units that they were making, but those 2 parts for those 2 product lines were painted different colors. Well, the supplier's paint system wasn't like ours in our factories where you could paint one part yellow and the next part black and the next part orange. We could make those changes on the fly. They couldn't. So he's having a fit that I need both of them, and I got that. But I also had to slow him down and help him understand that the reality of that vendor was that their process could do one color at a time. Which one do you want? Do you want yellow or black? I'll get them painted, but then we get stuff painted, and then it's gonna take several hours to change colors to get you the next. So I can't get them both for you right now. If you want them both right now, pick a color, get me an engineering deviation letter, and I'll get them both painted the same color and get them out to you faster. I can't paint both 2 different colors as fast as you want them. But his perspective was I was holding up his lines. I was making him fail because I wasn't getting him the parts he needed. And I'm dealing with the perspective from the perspective of the limitations of the supplier. They can only do so much. There's only so many things that can happen. And I was hated for the 10 weeks I spent down at that factory because I was on the supplier all the time. So I wasn't always real popular with the supplier. And I wasn't popular back in my home factory or my sister factory that I was supporting as well, because nobody was getting what they wanted. We weren't getting the parts out. I was the messenger and I got shot on a daily basis. But I was really working to understand the perspectives of each of the assembly lines, of the supplier, and the people I was dealing with, trying to understand what they were seeing, what they were experiencing, and working to find what can we do to make the best of this. It didn't really go great because there was no best. When there's steel shortages and the supplier doesn't have the steel, they can't make the part from steel they don't have. And one of our assembly lines actually slowed their ramp up to help with some of the demand, and they were at times being punished worse than anybody else because the steel they needed just wasn't available. And I got to blame for it. Now, fortunately, by always trying to put myself in the shoes of the other person, the assembly line, while they were ticked, they weren't quite as angry with me. They were annoyed, but they weren't as angry. So when I came back, all bridges hadn't been burned, fortunately, because I could understand where they were coming from, and I respected that. I did everything in my power to help them. I communicated that as best I could. So while they were really frustrated, when you have millions and millions of dollars worth of product waiting on a few $1,000s worth of parts, it's frustrating. I got it. And I was in the CEO's office of the supplier more than once over this. But it was really, I had to be understanding of all those perspectives to try to navigate it and not burn all of the bridges. And fortunately, it kind of worked because nobody ended up hating me. This supplier, I ended up changing jobs shortly thereafter, and the supplier said, "Congratulations, but dang it, we really liked working with you because you were firm, but you were fair." And the assembly lines, I didn't burn the bridges with them, even though they were frustrated with me during those 10 weeks. They respected that I attempted to understand where they were coming from, and I paid attention to what they were saying. So I still maintained those relationships, which is part of what allowed me to be promoted when I was. So taking the time to really understand what the other person is seeing. We can't see everything that's going on. It's not possible. We don't see what other people see. They have different roles and responsibilities. So taking a little bit of time to understand what they're going through, what they're struggling with, and respecting that can go a long ways to maintaining your relationships and helping you build your career and hopefully opening doors for you so that you can advance and go where you want to go. So, when you can, take some time to understand the perspective of others so that you can get where you want to go. And if you work on understanding their perspective, they're going to take a little time to understand yours. I'm going to be talking more about curiosity and the power of curiosity at work in my midweek madness break session tomorrow, October 20th. If you want to join me, you can go out to www.midweekmadnessbreak.live and register to join me and get the replays and all the other information. Have a great day and stay curious.